Sir, what's your name?
Hey, Chris.
Hey, Chris.
Just have a question. I've got a friend of mine, a coworker actually, who goes to Bible studies, believes in the Bible, but when we get on the subject of talking about hell, she doesn't believe that it's a real physical place of torment. I know we didn't really talk about that tonight, but I've shown her scripture about hell and the attributes of it being a physical place, but she still doesn't believe. Is there a better way to approach her, or there, what are some other things I can share with her to really elaborate on that?
Let me use an illustration I used at the University of Michigan with an atheist who asked me that kind of question. His name was Eddie Tabash, and we were at the University of Michigan, and we got to question one another during the debate, and his question to me was this: Frank, my mother was a survivor of the Holocaust. She lived a life full of pain and suffering. Toward the end of her life, somebody offered her the gospel, but she rejected it. Is she in hell right now? I said, wow, that's a tough question to ask in front of a secular audience, right? So I said, Eddie, I don't know where your mother is now. I don't know if she had a deathbed conversion or not. But if she didn't accept Christ before she died, then God is too loving to force her into heaven against her will.
So the short answer is yes, you believe her to be burning for all eternity for crimes she did not commit, simply because she saw no valid reason to accept your faith-based claim. That is what you are so very clearly attempting to avoid saying because of how it frames the Christian notion of justice and with it your proposed loving deity. Rather than taking the coward's route of pretending an act of torture is an act of compassion, you could have just said yes. That's not to mention the very condescending notion of bedside conversion that is always thrown out by evangelicals during any sort of conversation involving death and disbelief. It's an abusive way to chip away at anyone who died a non-Christian by gaslighting their loved ones because said person isn't here any longer to defend themselves. If I were ever to make it large in the secular community, if it's needed for much longer, I would be very tempted to publicly fake my own death, only to then return a few years later to demolish any evangelical who dared suggest I had a bedside conversion. The very notion is insulting to basic human decency, and as mentioned, is even a form of psychological abuse to the loved ones of said person.
You see, the assumption is everybody wants to go to heaven. That's not true. There are people running from Jesus their entire lives. They don't want to be with Jesus. He's in heaven. And so I asked the audience that night this question. In fact, I'll ask you ladies this question because this is the question I asked the audience at Michigan, was this. Ladies, have you ever had a man pursue you whom you did not want to date? Some of you are going, yeah, and he's sitting next to me right now. He will not leave me alone. Whenever I ask that question, the ladies always giggle and the men look at their shoes. Is she looking at me right now? Well, suppose this man keeps asking this young woman out and she finally has enough of it and she says, look, I like you, but only as a... Ladies, why don't you just stick the knife in and turn it? Every man has heard the dreaded friend rejection. Newsflash, men, if you ever hear that, move on. She's not interested. Because if she wasn't... What?
Thank you.
I heard a thank you back there. Move on. She's not interested. All right. Who was that? All right. Very good. Very good. In fact, I hate to be direct with you here, but I'm going to be. She doesn't even like you as a friend. She's just being nice. If she did like you, she'd be interested. Now, suppose this doesn't deter him. He continues to pursue. He continues to pursue. He gets to the point where he says, look, I love you so much, I'm going to force you to love me. Ladies, run, screaming from the building. Can he force you to love him? No, love by definition must be freely given. So if he did truly love you, what would he do? He would leave you alone. That's what God does for us. He sends us cards, letters, and flowers. He sends us creation. He sends us conscience. He sends us Christ. He sends us the Bible. He sends us missionaries. He sends us TV broadcasts, radio broadcasts, TV broadcasts if you have DirecTV. He sends us... In some countries, like Muslim countries now, he's appearing to people in dreams and visions because they can't get the gospel, but they want it. Now, if God does all that and we keep saying no, 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 then God will give us up to our own desires.
First of all, they should be left alone the first time they say no. But what is even scarier than you making light of stalking is your analogy if taken to its full destination. You see, this is not so much a false analogy as it is a half analogy. You haven't changed parts, you've left them out. According to what the person stated at the beginning and what you said yeah to and have yet to disagree with, hell is a real place of torture and torment. So hell is not simply being left alone. You don't simply move on to another form of earth where you live a life free of God. That's the Mormon way. You don't even simply cease to exist. What actually happens when we take your perspective and the perspective of the questioner is akin to a person threatening to pour gasoline over you and then setting you alight if you do not come to them. That takes the issue to a whole new level of inhumanity. The very notion that Frank Turek is upholding such abusive behaviors as domestic abuse as the divine standard of love and hundreds of people are laughing with him is terrifying. I cannot stress that fact enough. There is nothing loving in the threat of violence. You claim your deity doesn't demand said love because love must be given freely, while supporting the idea that if you don't love them, you will be tortured not for an hour, not for a day, but for all eternity.
In fact, Paul even says this in Romans chapter 1. He gives us up to our own desires. He leaves us alone. Now look, if there is a God and there is an afterlife, there's only two possible destinations. You're either going to be with God, that's called heaven, or you're not. You're going to be separated from God, that's called hell. And heaven is, of course, a place of great bliss because you're with the one source, the ultimate source of love and goodness out there. And everybody, whether they're believers or not, here on this earth has some of the benefits of God. God, His rain falls on the just and the unjust. His common grace goes out to everybody. Everybody experiences love and relationships and good things and these kind of things. But I want you to imagine a place where there's none of that, where there is no love, there are no relationships, there is no hope, there is no future. There's just stone cold narcissistic self-absorption. That's hell. You're separated from the only source of goodness out there.
Except by your own admission earlier, all of this good cannot come from said God, otherwise he would be invading people's lives, which according to you, he does not do. Therefore, by your own arguments, this is merely a cheap cop-out intended to distract from the discussion being had. God cannot be the only source of good if, upon request, he leaves you alone, and yet countless atheists still live such fulfilling lives even after that point. There's an internal contradiction here which is a symptom of a shoddy position put together hurriedly in a mad scramble to avoid the implications of the original question. The person asking the question mentioned torment and you agreed. You've now just attempted to switch out for a weaker explanation of what is being discussed, and I really do not buy it. Also, if your God was truly all-powerful, then why couldn't they create joy in absence of his presence? True love does not damn.
And according to the Bible, particularly if you look at Luke chapter 16, notice Lazarus and the rich man. The rich man's in hell, Hades, and he's not complaining about, I got to get out of here. He just wants Lazarus to serve him and make him feel better. And he doesn't say, I don't deserve being in here. He just says, go tell my brothers about the resurrection. They're not even going to believe if somebody rises from the dead. Why? Because they don't want to believe. The problem isn't here, the problem's here. They don't want it.
The time came when the beggar died and the angels carried him to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried. In Hades, where he was in torment, he looked up and saw Abraham far away, with Lazarus by his side. So he called to him, Father Abraham, have pity on me and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, because I am in agony in this fire. You believe this to mean that he is content with the supposed agony he is feeling and he has no desire to leave. Fact is, this doesn't display a simple absence of presence, like the extension of your half analogy. This clearly displays torture, i.e. induced pain, not simply a lack of feeling, but excruciating agony. Sure, he then goes on to tell them to keep him there but in the hopes that they will allow him to save his sons. To which your God and his minions do not jump at the opportunity to do so, instead preferring to see not only this one man, but also said man's children suffer at their eternal torture. The deity you describe is a barbaric stalker akin to someone threatening to burn their love interest alive if they don't love them back. I don't care what a person has done, eternal torture can never be justified. Actually, I take that back. Your proposed deity is far worse than any such human being. At least human beings are admittedly fallible, being susceptible to mental illness or severe indoctrination that makes them capable of such things. Your God, meanwhile, whom you claim is all-loving and all-knowing, has no excuse for being such a malicious bastard.
So, hell is a place of separation from God, and there will be levels of punishment in hell based upon how evil somebody was. Obviously, it would be unjust for God to put somebody, a garden variety person who didn't trust in Jesus, at the same level of punishment as, say, Hitler, just like there will be levels of reward in heaven. So this seems to be just. And at the end of the day, what I would say to that individual is this: if God is just and he is the standard of justice, whatever happens in the afterlife will be completely just. So nobody's going to complain, gee, I should have gone to heaven, or I should have gone to hell, or any of this. Everyone's going to get exactly what God in his just being will give them because of what they have done, or whether they've put their faith in the salvation of Christ.
Do you not realize how easy it is for any genocidal ideology to make the exact same argument about a perceived demigod? Oh, don't worry, the Jews will only get what they deserve, as mein Führer is just. If you find yourself incapable of justifying the supposed atrocities your deity has inflicted upon humankind according to the Bible, then maybe you need to question your position. You have done everything you can to suggest that the torture you agree to and is mentioned in the Bible will not be done out of spite like the malicious stalker, but out of compassion. The expression, if you love someone, set them free, if they return, they were always yours, if they don't, they never were, does not then quickly follow itself with, so set them on fire and watch them suffer for daring to reject you. I find the facts that people are laughing to this absolutely sickening. And yet, people wonder why we find so many issues involving domestic abuse and sexual assault in religious communities. Could it possibly be that the vile narratives like this work their way into people's minds and rot away at their very empathy? Either way, Mr. Turek, you have revealed yourself to be a vile person. There are a few things which I'd just like to add here at the end of this video. The first is a massive thank you to everyone who has ever donated to me via Patreon. Your fantastic support has given me the ability to keep this channel going, and I hope to continue producing content in the years to come. Secondly, I would like to thank anyone who has ever interacted with this channel. Your shares, likes and dislikes, as well as your comments of both approval and disapproval, have ensured constant feedback, allowing me to improve my work. Last of all, I would like to express my desire that you treat any of the people displayed throughout the video with respect. Whilst it is true that ideas do not demand respect, and there are many in fact which deserve reprehension, we must be careful on how we tackle said ideas in ensuring we are not simply targeting the person. In short, be the compassionate side of reason. So take care, and I'll see you next time.